insight into what it means and the sharpest opinion. There's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. Thinking more about the ridiculousness of Cook County State's Attorney Eileen O'Malley, O'Neill, Madigan, Cullerton, Daly, Burke, posting these signs. 7,000 signs are being posted on CTA buses and trains saying violence on buses and trains is unacceptable. Because it was just a knowledge problem. Nobody knew that committing acts of violence on CTA buses and trains was against the law, apparently. But I was thinking, why would somebody engage in such a silly performative exercise as this?
This is Chicago.
To have a safe, thriving city, we need to have a safe public transportation system. So today we are launching our initiative that we, as the State's Attorney's Office and the CTA, are taking crime on the CTA very seriously.
Everyone deserves a safe and enjoyable ride, and we're working together to make sure that happens.
We are putting up these signs as an indication of what the consequences will be of any criminal actions on the CTA. We are hoping to deter crime and to encourage people to come forward if they are witnesses of a crime.
These signs are a message to all of our riders and employees that we are working together with the County State's Attorney's Office to take action and ensure and promote a safe ride on the CTA.
Doors closing.
Why such a ridiculous performative action like that? And then it struck me, a column that our friend Shelby Steele, the great Shelby Steele, wrote a decade ago in advance of the 2016 election on the culture of deference. He wrote, since the 1960s, when America finally became fully accountable for its past, deference toward all groups with any claim to past or present victimization became mandatory. The Great Society and the War on Poverty were some of the first truly deferential policies. Since then, deference has become almost a universal marker of simple human decency that asserts one's innocence of the American past. Deference is, deference is above all else an apology. One thing this means is that deference toward victimization has evolved into a means to power. As deference acknowledges America's indebtedness, it seems to redeem the nation and to validate its exceptional status in the world. This brings real power, the kind of power that puts people into office. So deference is a power to muscle with. And it works by stigmatization, by threatening to label people as regressive bigots. You know, all of the isms and phobias you're accused of if you don't defer. And he goes on to say, as a society, we are so captive to our historical shame that we thoughtlessly rush to deference simply to relieve the pressure. And yet every deferential gesture, the war on poverty, affirmative action, Obamacare, every kind of diversity scheme only weakens those who still suffer the legacy of our shameful history. Deference is now the great enemy of those toward whom it gushes compassion. And so it is with law enforcement. But Eileen Burke knows or believes she can't speak with moral clarity about the kind of conduct she clearly opposes, as any decent person would, violence against people on public transit. But she has to do this deferential, performative, violence is unacceptable sign campaign because she can't speak with moral clarity about law enforcement. Because she is captive to the identitarian's culture of deference. That's my thesis, at least. Or explanation for the absurdity of what you just heard and what you're seeing if you ride the CTA. For more on this topic, related matters, somebody who has been invaluable on these topics over many moons, Heather MacDonald. She is the Thomas W. Smith Fellow at the Manhattan Institute and author of When Race Trumps Merit, How the Pursuit of Equity Sacrifices Excellence, Destroys Beauty, and Threatens Lives. Heather, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. I have to say, at least you guys have a whispered, hooded reference to the unacceptability of violence and maybe consequences, but of course really not. In your subway system in New York City, where people are being pushed into tracks, pushed into the cars, pushed down subway stairs on a weekly basis by these untreated mentally ill drug addicts, the only public announcement we get is a heartfelt plea to youth not to ride on top of subway cars because it's dangerous for them. Nothing about you don't mug the passengers. You don't graffiti on the station. So we're as tongue-tied and as paralyzed by the specter of, let's be honest, black youth violence as anybody else.
Do you agree with Steele's formulation, though, this culture of deference that he described?
Yes, absolutely. That's why we have completely unwound the juvenile justice system. It's behind the entire conceit that is so poisonous of disparate impact, which holds that if any constitutional colorblind law enforcement activity has a disparate impact on black criminals, it must be a racist practice, and therefore it must be dismantled. And it's behind the groveling offering of services to youth, more services, more free stuff, as a bribe to stop the teen takeover phenomenon. That's not what's needed. These people have all the opportunities, contrary to Brandon Johnson, if they stay in school, don't get involved in crime, graduate, wait until they are married to have children, they will not be poor, and they will have every college in the country knocking at their door to admit them if they have even just an average GPA. So we've come up with all these excuses. Oh, some of them are hilarious for the teen takeovers: hunger, capitalism, loneliness, the desperate need to connect, and, of course, the need for safe spaces in order not to look at the real problem, which is the breakdown of the family, the lack of socialization, and the lack of consequences. I mean, recently Johnson has been peddling yet again the standard line of, well, the problem is we don't have safe spaces for youth to gather, and therefore we need to create more programs and more youth violence interrupters and whatnot. Guess why they're not safe? The reason the safe spaces are not safe for teens is because the teens are making them unsafe. They gather by the thousands, and with a fairly large certainty, shootings will break out, brawls will break out, police officers will be attacked by the teens who are allegedly in need of safe spaces themselves. So it's a logical conundrum.
Well, that's what BLM Brandon calls kids being silly, what you're describing. And yes, you're right. It's just one more seminar program at the Art Institute, and all this clears up. It's just a safe space or two. We're a safe space or two away. The other thing he does that's interesting is, by the same token, he minimizes the barbaric behavior of those who engage in barbarism. Sorry for the tautology. He also suggests that it's not police that are reducing the incidence of violence in Chicago to the extent that that's actually happening, which is more than debatable. It's the community violence interrupters he's underwriting with everybody's money. Take a listen.
Where CVI exists, we have seen reductions as high as 45 to 50% in gun violence. And I commend these brothers and sisters who have returned out of a system that was never designed to rehabilitate them. But yet somehow they found enough hope to bring inspiration into the communities that they were traumatized by. Their effectiveness.
And isn't that an interesting way to characterize these alleged community violence interrupters that are ex-cons? That's what he's talking about, is that regardless of what they did, they are by definition a victim, traumatized by the system, traumatized by the way their community was policed, essentially, because they actually had to pay the consequences for whatever they did, or some approximation of the consequences. And yet they still overcome that trauma to do good work to reduce the incidence of violence on the streets.
Well, the Chicago police that I've talked to are pretty demoralized every time they hear that explanation. because it minimizes their own contribution, and they're really the effective ones that are able to go into these situations, and if they're remotely allowed to make arrests. But Johnson, who in 2025 called law enforcement racist, immoral, and unholy, is not about to give credit to the police. And of course, we all know with absolute predictable regularity, you're going to have the discovery that a bunch of these violence interrupters are still involved in gang activity. You know, they've been arranging drug deals and getting guns to their former colleagues, all the while being paid by the city. So the data is still very much out on whether these programs make a difference, but it's just another way of avoiding the issue, which is unless you have consequences for illegal, violent, destructive behavior, that behavior will continue. You are enabling it. You are encouraging it. And you can see the rate of juvenile justice outcomes of prosecutions has dropped radically from 2005 to 21. 67% drop in juvenile justice judgments against black male teens because they were simply not entering the system at all. Juvenile justice leaders were saying, nah, let's just let this guy back on the street. That's true with school discipline. You know, that dropped enormously under Presidents Obama and Biden because of the same ridiculous and dangerous disparate impact conceit, which is that if schools were disciplining black students at a higher rate than whites, that's racist discipline and it must be stopped. Well, the reason that there is a higher rate of discipline for black pupils is because they're much more violent. Black teens, males between the ages of 14 and 17, commit gun homicide at 10 times the rate of white teens of 14 to 17. And yet we somehow believe, if we are even going to acknowledge that fact, which is, of course, we're not. I mean, that's absolutely taboo. But it predicts that those teens that are committing that high rate of gun violence and homicide are not exactly going to be soft, docile angels obeying their teacher in the classroom. The same lack of socialization that produces that gun violence homicide rate is also going to affect their behavior. The schools are not racist. The reason black kids are being disciplined more is because they are committing more offenses in school. Simple story. And yet we're not allowed to do that any longer, and it's back to the deference that Shelby Steele talks about. It's back to white guilt and white terror of being called racist by the activist groups.
And now there's the potential that this gets scaled, this culture of deference, despite what has transpired, since the summer of love forward, the George Floyd riots and the burning of America's cities. What is ascendant on the left? It's DSA candidates like Francesca Hong in Wisconsin, of all places, who is likely to be that party's gubernatorial nominee against incumbent Republican Congressman Tom Tiffany, and that'll be a competitive race. And this was what, Bill Maher, a man on the left, had to say in a rant over the weekend on his show about candidates like Hong, and specifically Hong.
Francesca Hong, yet another major Democratic candidate who's all in on abolishing the police and is running for governor of Wisconsin, says, I think that my perfect world would be a world without prisons, because we all see the humanity in one another, and then we know nobody's disposable. Well, murder victims are. I mean, if you heard this kind of nonsense coming out of the mouth of a teenage beauty queen, it would be an eye roll.
That's a fun line, but it belies the reality of viability for candidates like Hong in Middle America.
Well, it's almost tried to say it because conservatives have been saying this for so long. When you stop punishing criminals and send the signal that this behavior will be tolerated, normalized, excused, the people who are initially hurt most are the law-abiding black members of high crime communities who are begging for more police. people like Hong, I'm sure, has never been the victim of a armed carjacking or drive-by shooting. She's insulated, and so there's just this mythology around the victimhood of blacks and a complete ignorance of what it means to live in a high-crime neighborhood and how that is a complete suppression of normal life. Elderly people scared to go on the streets to pick up their Social Security checks or go to the grocery store or get their prescriptions. You know, the people not in those communities fantasize about it. They romanticize the state of poverty and the nobility of the people that are living under the alleged boot of police oppression. That's all a myth. Crime is a complete destruction of the possibility of civil order, and it is the primary responsibility of government. Nothing else is as important as maintaining public order, and every politician who goes another day not getting crime under control, not getting property theft, looting under control, is absolutely violating his public oath, because it is an absolute certainty, statistical certainty, given the crime rates, that sometime that week dozens of shopkeepers are going to be robbed, people are going to be mugged. That has to be the main concern. The LGBTQ stuff can wait. The completely feckless, useless, homeless outreach can wait, because it only enables that behavior to begin with. They should all, every single day, say, how do we keep people safe?
Heather MacDonald is the Thomas W. Smith Fellow at the Manhattan Institute and author of When Race Trumps Merit, How the Pursuit of Equity Sacrifices Excellence, Destroys Beauty, and Threatens Lives. When Race Trumps Merit is the book. Heather MacDonald, the author. Heather, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dan. Great to be with you.
You too. And she joined us on the AlphaWealthGroup.com answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer. Don't miss In Grace with Pastor Jim Scudder Jr., now heard on Sunday mornings at 7:30. Tune in.